Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. For this week's Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about office hours.
Like virtual or real ones, or like college or high school?
All of the above.
Okay, cool.
All of the
cool.
above,
I'm in.
When I was in college, all my professors had office hours. And it was, kind of like they had to make sure that they were available so that if you had questions about something and you didn't have time to speak up in the middle of class because the instruction went all the way to the end and then they went on to their next class and you went on to your next class, there had to be a way for you to kind of follow up, and there was office hours. And I took advantage of that. Like probably, maybe half a dozen times, and, each year there'd be something that I'd have to, kind of talk to the professor about. And it was necessary to have those things because the accessibility to the professor was really at, almost zero outside of those office hours. They happen a lot in business as well. You have a lot of leaders out there who say that they have office hours, and if a leader's going into this from a standpoint of I'm busy all the time, therefore my people need to be able to have a set window of time that they feel like they can come bring something to me that is not in the normal course of business. I think there are a lot of leaders who have that kind of policy, and it's implemented with good intention. But I don't know anybody who's ever taken a leader up on office hours. Have you known about this happening, or is it just something that like kind of feels good to say and you have to say it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, like, it makes sense in theory, in regards to like being available and for having time dedicated for people to come and connect with you. And I think for certain roles, where similar to college professor, where much of your day can be eaten up in conference calls or meetings or things like that, that also then may work in specific certain roles. But I think this day and age in leadership, and especially like I could see more of it where virtually you may want to block some time to be available. If you are very busy with a lot of things going on. But I think in the physical space and leadership space, I don't know for me if it sends the right message in regards to like, I have the time to sit here and wait for you, but I don't have the time to be where you are and accessible for what's going on. Like, that's kind of how I view it a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, again, like I like the idea and the intent of saying, I want to make sure that if people have questions or if they want to connect or if they have things they want to discuss. And maybe some of those things may be, not necessarily personal, but maybe more private, or, something they don't want to bring up, in a larger group setting or in a meeting, that type of thing. I get the idea. I just feel that accessibility in regards to being there and being around your people and them having contact information and text messaging and all these different types of softwares and platforms to be able to connect with you directly. I just don't know that in the space that I work within, or like in most leadership spaces where you spend time with your teams and with your people directly, I don't know that I necessarily see the value in that as much as it maybe was needed over time, or even in the virtual world.
There's this kind of like this concept of necessary but not sufficient, meaning the idea of a leader who didn't have office hours doesn't sit right with me. But obviously it's not sufficient. It's not enough. But on the flip side, if a leader just kind of said, no, I don't have office hours because if you see me, that's my office hours. If I'm here, those are my office hours, period. Like because if I'm here 40 hours a week or 36 hours a week or 52 hours a week or however long it is, those are my office hours. Now, obviously you're not going to walk into a leader's office to go talk about something that's on your mind when they are giving a presentation to 4 people in their office at that moment. Like, so it doesn't really mean anytime that I'm here, but I think where a lot of leaders feel like they need to offer office hours are when they don't make themselves visible enough in the general day-to-day course of business. So if all the times that you are in your office, normally your door is closed, then you need to have an open door office hours or whatever, where your door stays open. But if in general your door is just always open, or if in general you don't have an office that you go into, but you try to do your work in full visibility of other people, unless you're talking about something confidential or that you really can't have people around for. I mean, how many people actually have a job where all of their work or the majority of their work is needs to be done in a setting where you are truly, confidential, behind closed doors, locked, no one can hear what's going on. So few leaders are in roles like that. Most leaders could do a lot of their work in full view of other people, which means your office hours really are just, hey, if I'm not already having a conversation with somebody, then come talk to me. But that has to be role modeled. And so what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is, have you reported to a leader in the past where you felt like they weren't as accessible, even though they should have been because they worked in the same building with you, but it just seemed like unless something was carved out on a schedule weeks in advance or days in advance, you just weren't going to get time with them. So I want to ask you that, but first I want to give it up to a word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, when have you reported to a leader who just didn't seem like they were accessible, even though in your mind you're thinking they really should be?
I know of leaders, and I've had indirect partners, collaborators, and leaders where it seemed like I had to schedule time just to talk to them. But in my entire career, every leader that I've ever had has made themselves accessible to me, and has built that type of a relationship where I knew I could get a hold of them if I needed to, and I would be respectful. And like there are definitely days and times where I've had leaders where I know they have a heavy calendar. There's a lot going on. They're going to be tied up in a lot of different types of things. But I respect that as much as I possibly can, because I know as a leader myself that it can be, there's a lot that can happen, and you have to be kind of very in the moment in many of those types of spaces. But I've never had a leader that I've worked for where I felt like they were not accessible to me or my peers when needed. And so I think that's probably why that's ingrained in me over the years and time, where I also believe that there's levels of accessibility, though. You have to be very conscious of your role and the role that you play and the responsibility that you have to the people that you work with, and that in some instances work for you. Like I said, we're talking about leaders of leaders and layers of leadership. And so, I would expect that your direct reports or my direct reports would have immediate access to me. I would expect that there's another layer below that, or maybe two layers below that would have the ability to get my time and attention relatively quickly and very, very, very intentional and have the time to schedule times and meetings. But then you start to get into certain team sizes and things like that where, yes, you're available. Yes, you're accessible. What you said, like you're visible, people see you, you're around enough that they can get time with you. But that based upon team size, you have to be very conscious of not being too accessible or too available, because that can also undercut your leaders' ability to show up in spaces for your people. So I think that there's a lot of dynamics here that have to be taken into account when you're considering just how accessible you are, and you have to make sure that you spend the time with those that you are really supposed to spend your time with, to make sure that they are getting what they need from you as their direct leader, or as the person that you have a responsibility to them to help with their specific development and growth from a career standpoint.
Right. There's this idea that if let's say that you're the CEO of an organization that has 10,000 employees, do you need to be immediately and directly accessible by all 10,000 of them? I mean, I don't know. That brings up an interesting thought when it comes to layers of leadership. But I will tell you that I worked for an organization once a long time ago where whenever the CEO put out any type of internal communication, his cell phone number was at the bottom of the signature, the actual cell phone number. And I never called it. And I don't know anybody who anybody directly who said that they did, but I had heard through the grapevine from people who said that someone once did call it and they picked up. And they called it literally not because they had something to say, but they called to say, when I see this cell phone number on the bottom of a signature, the first thing I want to find out is, are they serious? Are they really serious? And so they actually called them. And the person picked up apparently and said their name, and the response was, "Oh, just wanted to make sure this was real. Like this is a real thing." And it was a very short conversation apparently, but this was kind of like the urban legend that went through, was that no, it was a real thing. I think a lot of leaders who role model that, what the goal is not the actual accessibility, but the role modeling of it. So if a CEO can say, "I'm putting my cell phone number on every communication to all 10,000 employees," it's not because 10,000 employees need to call me every day. It's because I want to make sure that you know, as people 1, 2, 10, 12 layers of leadership below me, that if I can do it, you better darn well do it too. You better darn well be accessible to your people too. If I can say, here's my cell phone number and I have 10,000 employees in my organization, you better be able to say, here's my contact information for your 8 people, or whatever it is. So the role modeling of it, I think, is very important. And I think largely people will respect that. Largely people won't start calling the CEO because they have an issue. There will be a level of leadership below that they feel comfortable reaching out to, even if they don't have comfort talking to the direct boss. And that's where I think it is the most important, is the reason why these open door policies are important, but also that they come with a true kind of reaching out to people, not just saying, hey, my door is open anytime you want to, is that there will always be people in your organization who don't feel comfortable talking to the direct boss. They don't have a good relationship with whoever their direct leader is, and they need to feel like there's someone else they can talk to, where it's a safe environment for them to bring something up. And if you can make that happen from a standpoint of role modeling it and actually going out and reaching out to people, not just saying my door's always open, but hey, I'm going to schedule time with you. I'm going to sit down with you once a quarter or once a month or whatever it is, and we're going to talk. Because even though I have an open door policy, I don't necessarily believe that everybody will always use it or feel comfortable using it or want the rest of the organization knowing that they have used it. So instead, I'm going to schedule time. So the impetus is on me as a leader to schedule it and say that, no, this person didn't ask to meet with me. I asked to meet with them because I asked to meet with everybody. And I think a lot of times things that need to come to the surface are more likely to come to the surface when it's positioned that way, as opposed to just saying, hey, you can always come to me.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.